Good morning. I see 9 o'clock on my clock at least. So we are going to get started. My name is Helen Weber. I am the Director of Nonprofit Services at HW&Co, and I welcome you to our virtual nonprofit guide to success. And to lead us through pivoting when your plan blows up is Pat Egan. Pat, if for those of you that do not know Pat or familiar with her, she's been involved in the nonprofit world in management and fund development for more than 30 years as either a staff or a consultant. And she has also taught numerous courses on fundraising and strategic planning at the college level. And with that, I will turn it over to Pat to kick off our day.
Thank you. Okay, I am going to hopefully, here we go. Can you all see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Terrific.
Looks good, Pat.
I seamlessly did something that was high tech. Good morning, everybody. I am delighted to be here with you today and talking about what to do when your plan blows up. Whoever thought that we would have a pandemic? Today's agenda, we're going to talk a little bit about the impact of COVID-19. And then I will present a planning tool called the Balanced Scorecard. Moving from that, I will share how to use the Balanced Scorecard as a method of planning, and then hopefully be able to take some questions at the end. So moving right along, COVID did it. What did it do? The giving by donors shifted to basic needs. To complicate matters, we also had hurricanes and storms and other natural disasters that also contributed to giving, shifting to those basic needs and helping those people who are needing things right now. You know, like the fires in California. It seems like in addition to the pandemic, many other occurrences took place, and people like to help people. COVID induced layoffs and furloughs. You know, people who thought that they were firmly ensconced in their jobs and doing well. The economy was buzzing, people were giving, everything was looking good, and then boom, within 24 hours, things changed. So those layoffs and furloughs gave people unemployment. Organizations began to cut back. So that was a significant impact. Budget cuts, especially in the nonprofit world, the donors were holding back, and I have a little bit of data for you to share that. But when we look at restaurants and other places, some nonprofits are not going to do well. Others will be able to stay afloat. So, but all of them will probably have some sort of a budget cut. Shifting events to virtual. Nonprofits typically have some sort of event, whether it's a fundraising event, an education event, whatever. They're shifting to a virtual format. That for fundraising events, some are doing very well, some not so well. So that shift is causing some upheaval. Cancellation of events. I've seen some golf outings take place because apparently it's safe on outdoors on the course. But for big groups, for galas, those kinds of things, those are all being canceled or they are being transitioned to virtual auctions or different ways of managing those events. And the end result, unfortunately, is that fundraising is down, and we have to react to it in some way. Some giving trends. I don't want to be on this screen. I can't see. Okay, here we go. I'm sorry. My technology had a lapse. Some giving trends. Lending Tree did a study, and 15% of their respondents said that they have paused giving, which means that they're just adopting a wait and see attitude. 47% are giving less, and that was a QuickBooks study of their respondents. And that's almost half their respondents. But what's most troubling is the next statistic, which was in the Chronicle of Philanthropy. There was a 6% giving plunge in the first quarter, which translates to 25 billion in lost revenue. Billion. When you look at last year's giving report, it was over 400 billion. I haven't seen any statistics on the second quarter, which ended on June 30, to know what kind of impact, but I would suspect the first quarter ending in March and the second quarter ending in June, that there would be another drop in giving. Statistically, the people who respond, the high dollar donors, remain confident. And lastly, 20% of those giving $250,000 a year plus will give the same. 18% will give more. That was also a Chronicle study. The fidelity data, whoops, okay, gotta get back here. I keep on getting messages. I'm sorry, I'm getting messages on my screen that my internet is not doing well, and now I can't advance. Okay. Here we go. Okay, the fidelity data. 25% of donors, according to Fidelity. Now, this was a study not of donor advised funds. I have another donor advised fund study coming up on the next slide. But 25% of the donors that they surveyed will increase their donation. 54% will maintain at the same level. I thought this was interesting that 58% give domestically in terms of their behavior, 11% give internationally, and 20% give equally to both. You're talking about some pretty sophisticated donors here. 43% said they plan to continue to donate to the nonprofits that they have supported in the past, which really is not surprising to me, because if you have relationships with your donors, they are going to support you in good times and bad. Many say that they don't have sufficient information regarding COVID-19 issues related to the nonprofit, which says, what are you doing? What are you doing during this COVID? Are you continuing to offer your services? Have you suspended services? Have you gone to a different model? The donor advised study by Fidelity has a little bit different data. It says 33% expect to increase their gift. 59% will continue to support existing organizations. And 70% feel that they have enough knowledge and information to direct their support, which is a little bit different than the folks in the previous screen. These donors give at least $1,000. So we see that there's some mixed reviews, but overall, people anticipate giving to organizations that they support. So what do? You need to rethink how you are managing, doing business, and asking for money. It's really important to do that rethinking, because we cannot do the same old, same old. We need to review your current plan that's in place and make some adjustments. You need to, and I will go through the kinds of things that you need to be looking at. But most importantly, don't panic. Doing knee-jerk kind of responses and screaming that your hair is on fire is not going to work. It's very important to remain calm and to address what your organization needs to do to not only survive, but maintain at least the same level, and perhaps as things loosen up, to thrive. People are still giving, but your behavior has to change. So what do? You need to look at your plan, and you need to think. If you have a current plan, review and think what you can do to maintain your path and what you need to change. Say people who say, oh, we're just going to go on. I think it's going to be okay. It's not going to be okay. And the one thing that I think we've all learned during this pandemic is that just when we think we know everything, we hear something that has changed. Even looking at the whole mask situation, don't wear a mask, wear a mask, don't wear a mask, wear a mask. So every day it seems to be changing. However, we need to respond to those change. If you don't have a plan, you need to get one. The balanced scorecard approach is an easy way to review your existing plan or to create a plan that can take you into the future. Have a strategic plan. The times are requiring us to step back and say, oh my goodness, is this going to work going into the future? The balanced scorecard is a method of looking at your organization in a very simple way, using quadrants to cover all aspects of your business. It truly allows you to focus on key organizational elements that can make a difference. Sometimes we get so worked up about all kinds of things that we forget what direction we're really headed. I know I find myself, I think in my office, oh my gosh, I forgot to do something. I get up and I go into my kitchen and I've already forgotten why I'm going there. And sometimes that happens when we're doing our planning. We get distracted, we have a crisis crop up. So this allows us to focus on those key things and stay focused. It's also simple to track results and to make any corrections. And by corrections, I mean looking at your actions and your goals and strategies and address what's working and what's not working, and also to report to your board. I think boards are very active right now in the nonprofits and to ensure that the nonprofit is staying on track. So I'll begin talking about the first two quadrants. The first quadrant is the external quadrant, and that deals with everything outside of your organization. And that includes stakeholders, your clients. I put funders in here because they are external and they can fit into this quadrant or the finance quadrant. So wherever you have the most comfort level. I put it here because I like to be reminded to do communication, that they're just not a source of dollars, but they're also a source that we need to address during these times and make sure that the communication strategies are strong. The media is an important stakeholder. Program participants, prospects, volunteers. Oftentimes we forget that the volunteers are part of our audience that we need to be communicating with as well. Again, I put donors here because I want to be reminded that in addition to donors providing dollars, they also need communication strategies. So that would be external to the organization. If you have any donor societies, planned giving societies, legacy societies, I put that all in this as well. Again, as a reminder that we need to communicate to those folks. And again, and last but not least, in my I'm calling it my brain dump. This is what I think of off the top of my head to communicate to all of those individuals. Your external quadrant may look very different, but you need to step back and say, who externally impacts our organization and what do we need to do to ensure that those relationships remain strong during this period of time. Looking at the internal audience, your staffing. Are you staffing appropriately? I recently worked with an organization who had a receptionist that was being paid for 6 months to not show up. My question was, why? Could that receptionist be doing some other jobs? Could there be some cross training? Could that receptionist be doing some readiness work? So we need to look at our staffing and see if it's appropriate for the level of operation. I know that some of those dollars that were given to organizations to retain staff, a lot of that staffing time has expired, and you may be carrying staff that is, um, I shouldn't say not necessary, but maybe not warranted under these conditions. What organizational structure do you have? How are you organized? Are you organized in the most efficient way to deliver service during this time period? Do you need to revise? Do you need to collapse some functions? Do you need to take a harder look at your organization and say, do we really need 7 directors? Could we do with 6? Really doing a hard look at that. What human resource issues will arise? Again, eliminating positions, furloughing people, huge human resource issues. And with them comes unemployment dollars that you may have to approve. So human resource issues play big time into this kind of a thing. Facilities, looking at your facilities. Do you have a main headquarters and satellites? Are your satellites being used? Can you collapse some of those? What kind of things do you need to change in your facilities? I mean, we're all going into places now that have sheets of plexiglass everywhere, sanitizers everywhere, people standing and monitoring our entrance, armed with temperatures, to take our temperatures. What kind of changes? I've been in a lot of places where they have X's on the floor so that people know where to stand to have that social distancing. So when you look at your facilities, what do you need to do to make them safe? How are you recording your data during this time? Do you have adequate data recording gifts, to recording utilization? What kind of internal communications are you doing? Is staff worked up? What do you need? Are you having conversations with your staffs? And what are you doing to keep them posted on what's going on and what your thoughts are? In my own list that I came up with was HIPAA compliance. I was recently, again, the same organization, and they had staff calling people that were clients that had mental health issues, just checking in with them on a daily basis. Each staff member filled out a sheet that said, I talked to Joe today, and here's what Joe said. My question was, what are you doing with that sheet of paper? That could be deemed, a medical record or a medical action. So, we needed to step back and say, how are we storing these to ensure the privacy of each client? So, as we look to what we're doing, we also need to look to compliance. The balanced scorecard third quadrant is financial. What are your financial systems and what needs to change? What needs to stay the same? What did you project early in the year and what are your projections now? What kind of budget adjustments do you need to make? I know I worked with a client that we reduced our budgets by 40%. Just thinking what could happen in the future, what's happening to the fundraising events, and how are we responding to it. And last but not least, I put fundraising initiatives in this quadrant as well, because that supports your financial base. What are you doing? How are you managing them? How do they need to change? How are you going to transition into virtual? I was recently doing a training where the person didn't know how to operate Zoom. So, it's little things like that that you sometimes have to think about, that not everyone has the skill set. And if you're going to be doing something virtual, how are you going to manage that event and who is going to manage that event? The last quadrant is usually called growth. I tried to eliminate that in this balanced scorecard because I think most of us are trying to maintain at least at a higher level. And so I'm not sure that we really need to look at growth, but look more at maintenance. How can you maintain your business during COVID? What do you need to do? I'm seeing some innovative things. I know the International Film Festival, obviously an in-person kind of event, is now transitioning to offering some films virtually. Some of the theaters are doing things virtually. Some theaters are shut. I think it's really hard for the performing arts because it requires an audience and you lose something as you're doing it virtually, but I think it could still be innovative. Um, I think that some Zoom meetings for support groups and other ways to handle your constituents seem to be working. The good thing is people are learning that virtual can be pretty good. You don't have to leave your home. You can get up and get coffee. I don't like people to see people eating during virtual things. I have seen people eat sandwiches and stuff. You know, you may want to get rid of your video during that. But, you know, I think people are learning. And I think that there's going to be some significant change going forward. What kind of government funding is now available? There's some organizations that never had access to government funding that now have access. And what do you need to do to move forward? So that's kind of the balanced scorecard approach. As I said, everybody's scorecard is going to look different. Everybody's your internal and external audiences may change, but I thought I would give you some sort of a template so that you could start thinking what belongs in that quadrant. So once you've figured out what's in the quadrant, you need to review them in the prism for the here and now and the future. You know, you need to look at historical things, but a lot of history is not going to help significantly unless you really go back to the recession. There's been some talk that looking at what happened during the recession can give you some insight as to how we can move forward. I think that the recession was very different. We had some losses leading up to it, and it diminished over time. This diminished in 24 hours, and we had to react to it. So it could be up, and we're already seeing some signs that the economy is starting to recover, and the employment is starting to recover. So you could use that as a template or as historical review. But I think you need to look at what's happening here and now. What do we need to do to maintain, and what do we need to do and start planning for the future? You need to focus your energies on one or two elements in each quadrant, no more than three. Otherwise, you're going to be too scattered. Focus on the most significant to your organization and come up with mini plans for each one of those with measurable outcomes. It's not good enough to say, yeah, we're going to talk to our clients, when we have time or whatever. You need to have really some measurable outcomes. And monitor your progress regularly. I'm sure that your board will require you to do that. So moving forward, I just did some examples of how you can develop your goals and for each one of the quadrants. And I just randomly selected 2 areas to focus on, just as a sample as to what your short-term goals should be. The external quadrant, I chose maintain strong communications with clients. If you are doing support group, if you have been doing face-to-face with clients, if you do, dance lessons and those kinds of things, you may want to assign staff to communicate verbally with clients. And each client should be contacted at least twice a month. So you're saying you have some very significant activities. Again, if it has to do with anything medical, you really need to make sure that whatever you do is HIPAA compliant. The second goal for the external quadrant, I thought, was to communicate with funders to ensure that they understand what you are doing this time. Funders are very, very interested in how organizations are handling COVID, and many organizations are continuing to fund so that so that organizations can maintain. So it's important to engage in outreach to those funders, updating them on current issues and program offerings. What are you doing? Are you transitioning to virtual? Are you charging, or are you offering these for free? Those kinds of things are important for funders to know, and ensure that each funder receives monthly updates. And I'm talking about foundations, corporate funders, more major gifts. If somebody gives you $25, I'm not sure that it's really important for you to contact them on a monthly basis, but you certainly want to talk to your constituents on a monthly basis. So, let them know what's going on. Make sure that they are comfortable with what they're hearing. And if they have any questions, I know I talked with one organization that the staff agreed to post their cell numbers on the website, so that if people did have questions or did need some outreach in some form, that they were available in that way, to be texted or to call on their cell. Your internal review staffing during COVID-19. Do you need to furlough? I think you need to look at duties in accordance with the programming and organization needs, short-term and long-term. And if you're going to be doing some rollouts, how are you going to roll out? If you are planning on doing some limited programming in January, how are you going to roll that out? Are the staff that were present before the furlough going to be present to help you roll out? Are you going to have to recruit new folks, and have some sort of a plan to look at what's happening now? And if you look at starting to come back to life, so to speak, in January or after the first of the year, how is that going to be managed? You'll need to review that monthly and make adjustments on a monthly basis. Again, looking at those staff needs. If you don't have anybody coming into your organization and suddenly, you're open and you can have, I know one organization I was talking to, they opened, it was a drop-in place. They had 5 people last week. They have 22 this week with maximum of 24. How are you going to manage that? Who's going to take temperatures? How are you going to make sure that people are social distancing and keeping their masks on? What kind of staff is going to be required to ensure that those safety things take place? Also, looking at facilities, you need to address current operations. Are the satellites necessary? How are you going to manage that? And then you need to, again, along with staffing, need to determine current and rollout needs and establish a calendar and monitor. Again, who's going to be standing at the door? So what if your capacity is 24 and 26 people show up? Do you turn them away? Do you have a waiting area? Do you ask people who have been there for a while to leave? I mean, what kind of policies do you need to put in place so that you are keeping people safe? The finance quadrant, again, create a new budget to address the impact of COVID-19. I like to do a best scenario, worst scenario, and most likely, and hope that it comes out most likely. I know it's a lot more work, but I think if this is what could happen if the stars align. This could happen if the stars don't align, and will happen if the stars kind of align. Then you're coming up with some budgets that you can look at and monitor. You need to evaluate and adjust budgets as needed. I'm sure the finance directors that are on this call will say that, a budget is a budget is a budget. But I like to look at it and look at trending and be realistic and saying, a budget is not cast in stone. It is a path that we hope to take. And if there's things that happen during that pathway, then we need to address them. Those of us who did budgets at the beginning of the year or at the end of last year for this year, starting on January 1, that was a stark realization that we can't always count on our budget that we craft before a pandemic. Again, who ever thought? You need to also examine, in this sample, I chose fundraising implications. You need to create a plan to continue to engage donors. Donors need to know that you are still doing some sort of mission fulfillment. There needs to be some communication with them. At Komen, we started Komen Conversations, which took place every Monday at noon. It lasted 15 minutes. We told everybody, gave everybody the link to Zoom. It started out with the executive director talking about an issue. The second part was either a testimonial or a board member or somebody talking about the implications of the issue. And then the third part was a call to action. This week, we would like you to do whatever, register for the walk, download the app. So, there are easy ways that you can do that. We didn't know how that was going to work, and we found out that people were watching. Again, 15 minutes, 3 different people, very, very easy to do. And it keeps your donors and your audience, your constituents engaged. You can make announcements about upcoming events, and we recorded it, and we found that the recordings actually got a lot of viewing as well. Establish a plan to communicate to high wealth donors to ensure continued gifts. From that aspect, I wrote love notes. I call them love notes. And I just wrote, initially during when the pandemic started, I just reached out and I said, I'm thinking about you. I hope you are doing well. Subsequent emails said, I hope your business is doing well. I hope that you're not, suffering. I hope that you're maintaining during these times. And if there's anything I can do to help you, please let me know. So, making sure that you're telling people that you are continuing your mission in some way, or that you plan on continuing your mission in the near future. Again, I think a newsletter or some sort to let donors know that that you are continuing to fulfill your mission. Monthly updates, and again, don't write pages and pages and pages. We have found that people just don't read. They don't read. And I know when I open my email in the morning, if I see a lot of stuff in there, I delete. So make sure that you're giving them information that they want to hear, not information that you specifically think that they need to know. I call it outside in thinking. Think what people like to know. How are you fulfilling your mission during these times, and how would funding help? If this, then that. If you give, then this happens. Again, being very thoughtful about the messaging. The last quadrant, growth maintenance, how do we need to adapt programming to remain a viable organization? Again, how can we deliver programs without harming clients? What kind of an environment do we need to create? This could be, again, under facilities. You need to figure out where this is the best place to put this. What do we need to do to make that happen? And what kind of steps do we need to create to adapt to the current environment? This is one of my favorite things. What is our competition doing to survive? I think if our competition is more creative, if our competition is more innovative, if they beat us to the punch, we need to not copy, but we need to be creative as well. Are they providing virtual programs? How are they continuing their mission fulfillment? Are they closed? And you are open. You could have the edge there, competitively speaking. And if they're doing the same thing kind of that you're doing, how can you differentiate to your particular audience to share what your mission fulfillment is and how you are doing that to survive during this pandemic? In summary, I'm trying to be mindful of my clock here. Don't panic. Again, panicking isn't going to help anybody. I know we look sometimes at the numbers and we get dismayed and we wonder how we're going to continue. But it's just like the recession in 07 and 08. The launch of I'm sorry, I had my alarm go off to tell me that I'm running out of time. That we, the recession lasted a long time. It lasted a number of years. And, I don't know how this pandemic is going to last. I don't know, I wish we knew, that in a year from now, we'd all be smiley and we could see everybody's full face. I teach a class at Baldwin Wallace. And, if I did a Zoom meeting and for the first time, I got to see my students' full face because all of them had masks on before. So, I think that, we're adapting, but, with this can't last forever. And that's what we have to keep thinking. It's important to know that you need to adjust. It can't be same old, unless your same old is producing results. But I still think that a good hard look is really important. Know that this may not end for a while and view it as an opportunity to expand your programming in a new way to a new audience. I often think that I've been part of the Broadway series at Playhouse Square for years and years. And I'm sure that there's a segment of the audience that would love to see some of those productions, but just can't afford to do it or can't afford to buy a seat, or everything is sold out. Is there an opportunity to do virtual or to share afterwards? The Disney Channel, I think, has done wonders and creating people being able to view Hamilton on Disney Channel. So I think that there's new ways, and the only thing that's stopping people is their ability to think about those innovative ways. And last but certainly not least, plan, review, adjust, and keep planning. It is your roadmap. You don't want to get stuck in the mud. And with those final words, I think I can answer any questions that might be in the box. According to my clock, I have a few more minutes, maybe 3 or 4 minutes. Do we have any questions from the audience?
I do not see any questions at this point. So if you do have a question for Pat, we do have a few minutes. So I would type in your question and we can get it answered for you.
Well, I've enjoyed sharing the balanced scorecard with you. I think it's just really an easy way to look at things and to report on things. So easy way to report on your progress. I've done this on one sheet of paper where I've used red, yellow, and green, and focused on the red and the yellows and just kept on reporting on the greens. We all know what a stoplight looks like. And, red is, wow, we're in trouble. Yellow is we're cautiously optimistic. And green is we're doing great, but we still have to monitor.
Yes, Pat, I thought that scorecard was excellent. It's a lot to think about and a lot to digest if you've never thought of it that way, though. So it's a great takeaway. So
Well, if anybody has any questions afterwards, whoops, here's my information. It's on the last slide. And I am happy to share with you any other tools that I have. I recently did a training in a fundraising fitness test, which also shares new kind of data and allows people to really focus on those areas that could that are identified as areas to improve and maybe enhance your fundraising. So that fitness test is available, and I can share that tool with you as well. You know, if you want to focus on fundraising and trying to improve your overall fundraising capabilities and focus on areas that that could possibly provide you with new money.